Everyone, and thanks for coming out again and joining us on a Sunday morning or an evening or whenever it is that you're watching this. I'm thankful that we have the opportunity to continue on this journey with the Advent Conspiracy, and we're not limited to just waiting for the opportunity for us to come back together. So thank you for joining in the conversation, for keeping this up. We've got a couple more exciting weeks as we look forward to celebrating the birth of Jesus, and especially this morning as we continue to look at this idea of the Advent Conspiracy. But I wanted to start off this morning reading a little bit from one of my favorite books and one of my favorite book series, and that, of course, is Harry Potter. And this is from the Sorcerer's Stone, or if you're in England, the Philosopher's Stone, but same book. And if you're not familiar with the Harry Potter series, it's basically about a boy who has wizarding powers. He's born with them, and he's part of a class of wizards that he's not aware of. His parents have been killed, and so he's being raised by his Uncle Vernon and his Aunt Petunia, and he has to live with his spoiled cousin Dudley. And so the story is about him discovering his powers, going to the school. Well, the thing is that his aunt and uncle and cousin do not like him at all. They're not impressed with where he came from, what happened to his parents, and why he's living with them. And the story starts off really on Dudley's birthday. Very, very crazy occasion for Harry. And so this is where we're going to pick up the story for just a little bit as Harry Potter is being forced to cook breakfast for the Dursleys on Dudley's birthday. Harry was frying eggs by the time Dudley arrived in the kitchen with his mother. Dudley looked a lot like Uncle Vernon. He had a large pink face, not much neck, small, watery blue eyes, and thick blonde hair that lay smoothly on his thick, fat head. Aunt Petunia often said that Dudley looked like a baby angel. Harry often said that Dudley looked like a pig with a wig. Harry put the plate of eggs and bacon on the table, which was difficult as there wasn't much room. Dudley, meanwhile, was counting his presents. His face fell. 36, he said, looking up at his mother and father. That's 2 less than last year. Darling, you haven't counted Auntie Marjorie's present. See, it's here under this big one from Mummy and Daddy. All right, 37 then, said Dudley, going red in the face. Harry, who could see a huge Dudley tantrum coming on, began wolfing down his bacon as fast as possible in case Dudley turned the table over. Aunt Petunia obviously sensed danger too, because she quickly said, "And we'll buy you another 2 presents while we're out today. How's that, Popkin? 2 more presents. Is that all right?" Dudley thought for a moment. It looked like it was hard work. Finally, he said slowly, "So I'll have 39 sweetums," said Aunt Petunia. "Oh." Dudley sat down heavily and grabbed the nearest parcel. "All right, then." Uncle Vernon chuckled. "Little Tyke wants his money's worth, just like his father. Attaboy, Dudley." He ruffled Dudley's hair. At that moment, the telephone rang, and Aunt Petunia went to answer it while Harry and Uncle Vernon watched Dudley unwrap the racing bike, a Cinecamera, a remote-control airplane, 16 new computer games, and a video recorder. He was ripping the paper off a gold wristwatch when Aunt Petunia came back from the telephone, looking both angry and worried. So why have I opted to read a Harry Potter segment as we talk about the Advent Conspiracy and this week's topic of giving more? Well, partly because honestly, when I reread this and I read it now, I realize that I relate to Dudley in this situation quite a bit, because I realized looking back that I was kind of a Dudley around Christmas time. I do remember comparing previous years, this year, like one year's Christmas presents with the previous years. How many were there? The cost and the amount of the gift didn't really matter much. I really was about the quantity of what was under there. I wanted to know how many presents it was that I was getting on any particular year. And if I didn't get the same as the previous year, quite honestly, I was a little bit disappointed. I wanted to make sure that I had that same amount, because that to me was where the value came in. It was really about the numbers. And one of the things that's also my memory of looking back over the years is that the morning would come, we'd open up our presents, and we'd spend time looking at each other's gifts and oohing and awing and being thankful for one another and being grateful and enjoying on each other's presents. But as soon as that was done, we would take our stuff and we would go and we would do our own thing. And the next time we'd really come and gather together would be during the Christmas meal. The gifts that were given, even just like the description we read from Dudley, is that they're all designed more for individual use. They weren't designed or intended to be used together as a family, or the Christmas, the day itself, was not set up to be in a way where we're spending time together. It was really, we're going to have the meal together and we're going to spend a lot of the day separate doing our own things. And over the years, I've come to question this style of gift giving and this style of celebrating on the holiday, because I've realized that the gifts that I grew up with in the tradition emphasize the individual, and the gift rather than relationships with others. And I feel like that in the midst of that, we kind of missed the point of what Christmas is all about. I've just recently listened to a book called God in the Dock by C.S. Lewis, and it's a collection of essays and letters and other unpublished material that they've compiled. And in it, there is a satirical essay that Lewis wrote about a fictional country named Niatrib, which, if you look at it, is actually Britain spelled backwards, but Niatrib. And this is what Lewis writes about a holiday that this fictional country celebrates. One of the excerpts is this is Lewis writing. He says, "In the middle of winter, when fog and rains most abound, they have a great festival which they call Xmas, spelled E-X-M-A-S. And for 50 days they prepare for it in the fashion I shall describe. First of all, every citizen is obligated to send each of his friends and relations a square piece of hard paper stamped with a picture, which in their speech is called an Xmas card. And because all men must send these cards, the marketplace is filled with the crowd of those buying them, so that there is great labor and weariness. They also send gifts to one another, suffering the same things about the gifts as they do the cards, or even worse. For every citizen has to guess the value of the gift which every friend will send him, so that he may send one of equal value, whether he can afford it or not. And they buy as gifts for one another such things as no man ever bought for himself. For the sellers, understanding the custom, put forth all kinds of trumpetry, and whatever, being useless and ridiculous, that they have been unable to sell throughout the year, they now sell as Xmas gifts." Lewis goes on to write that when somebody has done their shopping and they've got their cards and they sent their gifts, they sit down at home and they breathe a sigh of relief because their duty is done and the obligation has been met, until they get a card or a gift from a friend or relative that they did not buy a gift for or send a card to. At which point, as Lewis writes, they beat their chest and they lament as they gather up their coat and go back out into the cold to rectify the oversight. Lewis concludes that the celebration results in weariness and a soul that is tired and tired and having a broken spirit. Excuse me. But there's another group that also celebrates on this fictional island. They celebrate another holiday called Christmas, which Lewis spells C-R-I-S-S-M-A-S. This is what Lewis writes about them. He says, "And those who keep Christmas doing the opposite of the majority of the Niatribians rise early on that day with shining faces and go before sunrise to certain temples where they partake of a sacred feast. And in most of the temples, they set out images of a fair woman with a newborn child on her knees, and certain animals and shepherds adoring the child." So if you've read any of Lewis and read like the Chronicles of Narnia or anything like that by him, you know Lewis is not too subtle in his imagery that he puts out there. Now, I had to laugh when I was listening to this, one, just because it was really funny, and two, because this kind of explains exactly what the Advent conspiracy is all about. I mean, we hear every single year that Christmas is not about the gifts, that it's about Jesus and it's about each other. And yet, as much as we hear that, it feels like every single year the gifts seem to take center stage. Even in the Advent conspiracy, that idea of spending less, which we talked about last week, and giving more, which is what we're talking about this week, they don't seem to make a lot of sense. Because how can you spend less but give more? Even that question there carries with it the assumption that giving more means you have to give more things, more gifts, more items, more stuff. And especially when the culture is constantly bombarding us with ads to buy more. Gifts for him, gifts for her, gifts for them. The perfect gift, and it's always about this stuff. So how does focusing on Jesus encourage us to spend less and to give more this Christmas without thinking about how do I do that without buying stuff? It's about moving away from the commercialized aspect of Christmas and moving back to that idea of Jesus and relationships. Because that is what the essence of giving more actually means. It's not about stuff, it's not about things, but about taking that idea of spending less and giving more personally and more creatively and more thoughtfully that we talked about last week, and then putting it into practice. It's that personal, relational aspect, where the gift giver, where the gift expresses as much as the giver as it does the givee. So a few years ago, obviously Rowan and Eve are still, 8 and almost 6 now. But a few years ago, the kids, they did buy me something. I got me a gift that for me has a lot of meaning. It expresses them a little bit, and it expresses me a little bit, and it shows they put thought into what it was they wanted to give me. Now I think Rowan was 5 at the time, 4 or 5 at the time. But what they ended up getting me was quite simply a Star Wars cup. And this Star Wars cup here, it's a thing, granted, but every time I drink coffee out of this Star Wars cup, I think about how I got it and about them taking the time to think about me, to think about the things that I like, and then picking it. And then when they gave it to me on Christmas morning, it came out full of coffee. And I remember the kids even talking about oh, can we give Dad his cup now? Can we give him his coffee cup? And Rowan at the time, he didn't even like Star Wars. He had a bad Star Wars experience and he just didn't want to deal with it. But when he saw the cup, he's like, I want to get that for Dad. So every time I still think about them thinking of me. And now whenever we have hot chocolate or anything like that as a family, it's like I can pull out the Star Wars cup and it's fantastic. It really still means a lot to me. Obviously, you can tell that. So the idea of giving more it means you're thinking about the other person, thinking about what they like and how you can use that, hence the Star Wars cup is what they got from them. But sometimes it can also mean giving more of yourself and giving more of your time. And it's the same idea that is often runs around in Christian circles of God giving himself for us. They draw this out a little bit in the Advent conspiracy of God giving so much more of himself in Advent than any other thing that we can think of. And this is, like I said, not a new thought. If you spent any time in Christian circles, you've probably heard the phrase of the free gift of salvation. That salvation it's a gift, it's free, it's offered out there to you. And the New Testament as a whole, and Paul specifically, does talk about that a lot. He talks about this free gift that we have, this gift of salvation that is being offered out to us. And you can see that all over the place. But in Romans 5, it's one spot where it feels like everything is just really concentrated, and you can just see that idea of the gift brought out really intensely. So in 2 verses, Paul uses the gift 5 times. And he goes so far as to even use 2 different words for the word gift, just to kind of mix it up a little bit so you don't get bored reading the same thing over and over again. Kind of like we can use the word gift in present. It means essentially the same thing. But he's using it to be like, this is how much he is emphasizing it in just a short time frame. And in chapter 5, part of this section starts off with Paul comparing Adam to Jesus. Now, not Adam post-fall, not Adam after Genesis chapter 3, but Adam as he was originally created. And it says that Jesus is basically the second Adam. He's a man of pure humanity before the fall, before the corruption. And in this being the case, Jesus and both Adam are representatives of the human race in its pure form. And then it talks about Adam's trespass. And trespass in this sense means the actual act of sin, the act that led to the consequence of separation from God and to death. That act was the trespass. That eating the fruit was the trespass. It was the act that had a result of that broken relationship. And verse 15 then goes on to read, but the gift is not like the trespass. And I do think that you can make a really good case here that while Paul does often talk about the result of Jesus' crucifixion and resurrection being the free gift of salvation, I don't think that he is exactly pointing to that here. I think that Paul is talking about Jesus' entire ministry, his birth, his life, the actual crucifixion itself as being that gift, that Jesus himself is a gift. That giving of yourself in that sense is probably the most relational gift that you can give. And there's a question that has popped up several times throughout church history that goes along the lines of something like this, that if Jesus had to die, why couldn't he have just been born and then died and taken care of the sins of humanity that way? Why did he have to grow up? Why did he have to live? And as I've thought about that before, it's kind of like, well, I guess technically, maybe, but to be honest, that's not a very relational way to go to secure people's salvation. Back in 1990s, there was a rock band, Everclear, and the lead singer, he wrote a song called Father of Mine. And Father of Mine is an autobiographical song where he recounts growing up with an abusive father, and about how the father eventually, after years of abuse, gets up and leaves the family. He abandons them. And one line in the song reads, "Sometimes you would send me a birthday card with a $5 bill. I never understood you then, and I guess you never will." And I guess I never will. Let me read that again. "Sometimes you would send me a birthday card with a $5 bill. I never understood you then, and I guess I never will." See, the singer didn't want a $5 bill. He didn't want the gift. He didn't want the thing. What he wanted was a father. What he wanted was a relationship with his dad. And he goes on in subsequent interviews about this song, talking about how his dad called him cowboy up to the age of 14. And he traces back saying, the reason he called me cowboy is because when I was 5, I said I wanted to be a cowboy. His dad had missed out on 9 years of growth because he was separated from his life. That's not very relationable. And so seeing Jesus just as born as a baby and then dying, we can't relate to that. We can't understand. How can we relate to Jesus, and how can Jesus relate to us if the only experiences that he had was those short few moments as an infant and as a child? It doesn't enter into our world. We can't build a relationship with just that. And one of the major things about Jesus' life and ministry in growing up was he could do exactly that. He could relate to us. He could enter in our world. He could understand where we are, and that we can understand a little bit what he has gone through as well. In fact, Luke 2, after Jesus' birth, it describes Jesus' growing up in 2 different ways. It describes him from his childhood to boyhood and from boyhood into manhood. And it talks about how he grows through each of those experiences. He grows in stature. He grows in wisdom. He grows in strength. He continually grows. He learned new things, and he experiences life just like the rest of us. And the Gospels are great because they don't hide Jesus' humanity in any way, shape, or form. They talk about when he weeps, when he gets angry, when he's sad, when he's hungry, when he's thirsty, when he goes through all those things that we experience, even down to the point of when Jesus is tired or when Jesus gets annoyed. It's all laid out. It's all there. And the author of Hebrews in chapter 4 talks about the importance of the high priest in general, saying that a high priest has to be taken from everybody else, has to be taken from the people. Because that's the only way that a high priest is going to be able to sympathize, is going to be able to empathize and understand and represent the people, is if he has lived life with them. And Jesus is better than any high priest we've had in the past. He is the final high priest. He is the great high priest. And it says that he was tempted in every way just as we are, and yet was without sin. So Jesus was tempted in his life, just like Adam was, except that Adam gave in to the temptation and transgressed God's will, whereas Jesus stayed the course. And through the temptations and through the struggles and through life, he is able to say, I know what it is you're going through. And so he does that. It was a gift that was over 30 years in the making. 30 years for Jesus to build, to give that gift of the crucifixion, to give that gift of his life, so that we could be with the Father, with the Son, with the triune God for eternity. And if he was born and if he had died, none of that would have been able to happen. That relationship, that style of relationship just wouldn't have existed. And so God has promised to restore the broken relationship between himself and creation. And the best way and the only way that he could do that would have been to give himself. And so that gift of Jesus is the ultimate relational gift. And that, when we talk about giving more, is what we're asked to keep in mind. Because gifts are nice. Gifts can remind us of the gift giver. We can remind us of who they are and what they think about us. But giving relationships and giving relationally is even better. So giving more means exactly that, giving relationally. It could mean that you make the gift. It could be so that when the person looks at it, they think of you, and it reminds them of times that you have spent together, lessons that you have taught them, things that you have shown them. It could mean that you give up your time to simply be with the person. I love the story in the Advent Conspiracy of the son who bought his dad that bag of gourmet coffee with the stipulation that the only time you can drink it is if you're drinking it with me. It's bringing them together to spend that time as father and son, to connect, to stay connected and continue to grow. And that's the challenge I think that we're facing over these next 2 weeks as Christmas is rapidly approaching, is how can we give relationally? How can we know and connect more with our family and with our friends? Now, the Advent Conspiracy itself gives a list of several different things that we can do to give relationally, and I've attached that. If you receive this link by email, it's attached to that email itself. Ideas of how we can go out into our families and say, I want to stay connected with you. I want to give relationally so that we can grow together, we can know each other more, and creating those opportunities then just to share our life and to share our love and to share our faith. It's an exciting thing to be able to do that. And that is the goal of what we want to do right now, is to be able to make sure that we can continue to share relationally, to give more of us, to give more of our time, to give more meaning, to give more relationally. If you'll pray with me. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the gift of you. We thank you for how you have given yourself to us in the most relational way we can ever possibly think or imagine. Lord, you are an amazing God. We love you, and we pray that these next few weeks that you would give us minds to think relationally, minds to think of how we can give more to those that we love and to those around us. How can we take that idea and in those relationships have that opportunity to display your love, your grace, and to show what it is that you have done for us. So we love you, and we look forward to spending more time with you and with each other. We look to build that relationship all around as our church. We pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, thanks everybody. We look forward to seeing you on Thursday so we can dig into this idea of giving relationally and giving more, just going a little bit deeper. So look forward to seeing you guys, and I'll talk to you later.